Hello, and welcome to Authors Die Twice, a podcast on video games and aesthetic theory hosted by two living failures. In this week's special episode, Bryan and I are joined by Sam Tett, a literary scholar at the University of Utah who also works on games. Together, we discuss The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, a game that's really significant for all three of us. We hope you enjoy the conversation. So, we are incredibly honored to be joined by Sam Tett for this episode. Sam is a postdoctoral fellow in English at the University of Utah. And starting this summer, she'll be beginning as an assistant professor in the English department, working on Victorian literature and gender studies and theory, and of course, video game aesthetics and narrative. So, thanks so much, Sam, for coming on. We're going to be talking about the video game Skyrim today, which is the first thing we ever talked about together, I think. And I know that you are writing a book on Skyrim in addition to your other scholarship on 19th century novels. So I thought we might start I don't know, I just want to ask right at the outset, like what is it about Skyrim that captivated you so much and has led you to want to study it and write about it and express some relationship to it?
Yeah. Well, hi to both of you. Thank you for having me. Yes, I am in the process of writing a book about Skyrim. It's tentatively titled Skyrim and the Novel, but TBD on that. And that is a very hard question. I'm not sure I have a perfectly formulated answer to why Skyrim is my repeated obsession, but it's something about the fact that it's an immense world that is at the same time navigable. And so I think, as a Victorianist, right, there's something about Skyrim that is both Austenian and Dickensian at the same, which doesn't really even make sense. I mean, how is it combining the infinitude of a Dickensian London with the manageability of an Austenian village? But somehow it does. And so I wonder if it's something literary that attracts me to this game world. I just love spending time in it.
I love the idea of limitation there just right off the bat because this is a game that's known for being essentially like, I mean, to my knowledge, like the first smash hit, ultra popular open world game in this style. We had open world games before, like, if you're earlier in the decade, especially the Grand Theft Auto games, but Skyrim is often seen as establishing a certain template for like the
Mm.
explosion of open world freeform games, especially in the past 10 years that are now like sort of the butt of a lot of jokes, or it's become fashionable to hate on those games as design philosophy. And that's something that I really take issue with, both the kind of lazy criticism lobbied, I think, at open world games, like by just sort of in absolute terms in gaming criticism, and also with the idea that Skyrim has some relationship to that trend, because I think it's like pretty singular as far as open world design goes. But yeah, like despite the expansiveness of this game, it's also incredibly like limited. I mean, even to the point of like you walk all over this world from one city to another, from the kind of rocky like architecture of Markarth to, the thatch sort of buildings in Whiterun, and you meet the same like five voice actors. It's just like the same people and they all look the same. There's like so few character models in this game. It really does feel like you're just in this weird universe where there's like multiplicity and like condensation happening at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And in defense of the voices, I mean, you're not wrong. Everybody is Bellathor. Everywhere you go, everybody's Bellathor. But at the same time, I think those distinctive voices tend to be attached to characters you're supposed to pay more attention to. And so it's a way of signaling, it's a way of organizing the world that is to me Dickensian, because these voices are the really exaggerated ones. They're the really cartoony ones. They're the ones that you couldn't miss it. And I think that's one of the levels of organization that the game is operating on, is that it's trying to help you to navigate what was kind of a new landscape,
Hmm.
certainly in size, by cluing you in with these voice cues is one of the ways that I think it does it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Can I ask a more like vulgar question, which would be, can you like roughly pinpoint the number of times you've played Skyrim or like the number of hours you put into the game? And Brian, I also want to hear, sorry, I'm just like totally steamrolling you. I want to hear also about your, background with the series because that's not something we've never actually really talked about, surprisingly.
Yeah, I want to know that too. I mean, no, there's two reasons I could never log the amount of time I've spent playing Skyrim. And one is because it's just too many to even, there are times in my life where I've lived half there and half here. But also because I played it across a bunch of different PlayStations. And so there's a way that Skyrim is also attached to different kinds of relationships throughout the course of my life. And so I've had different avatars attached to different relationships with the people who own those PlayStations. And so the hours I've logged are distributed across the country on PlayStations 3 through 5. So I could never really say it's a lot. It's a lot. I know that.
Which is kind of perfect. I mean, because I love the idea, and Nathan and I have talked about this a bit as well, of kind of the literariness of the game. I mean, I feel like, there's a way in which there's like a phenomenological literariness that's maybe not even tethered to like a type of novel or a periodization or whatever. Like that's what I tend to think about, but totally this kind of functional trope character that keeps repeating throughout makes a lot of sense. But I think that also maybe like that says something about why it's difficult to log how many hours too. Like, of course, you could just look at your file, I guess, and like track down those discrete PlayStation systems or whatever and figure it out. But also, that's like the same type of question as asking like, you know, how often do you think of the world in terms of X, Y, or Z novel that is your favorite novel that you always think about, right? Because I think games, that's one way that maybe they kind of do the same thing is that they don't just teach us about the world, but we like feel like we're in them in the world or something like that. Or at least I do sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, and for Skyrim, that seems especially true. Just for us, Sam, like when we're here in Salt Lake, we both work for the University of Utah, so I mean, I spend a lot of time in Salt Lake City, and there are mountains everywhere, and I know we've talked about how much it resembles Skyrim at times.
It really does. I was thinking that just today, and I wonder how much of my immediate love at first sight for Salt Lake City had to do with the imprint that Skyrim left in my brain. I mean, it does look a lot like it. And this is the first place I've ever moved to that I instantly loved. And it didn't occur to me consciously at the time, but these boundaries between digital spaces that we inhabit and real spaces, they're really permeable. I think about that a lot, especially with the landscape around Utah.
Yeah, Brian, like, I mean, do you have any early associations or formative associations with Skyrim
I mean,
or Rules games?
yeah, so I definitely the earliest one I had played was Morrowind,
Mhm.
which I remember had like the load times were, you know, like 10 minutes actually or something like the load times after you die, which would be oftentimes pretty much immediate. You get killed by like a mud crab or something over and over again. You have to you spend more time loading than you do. I don't even remember what system that would have been on.
Xbox.
Xbox. Okay, yeah. Yeah, and then I played, I think I'm not sure. I played a lot of Oblivion, and even when Skyrim came out, I mean I loved it, but I think I kind of still I mean I haven't played Oblivion in years now, but I did, as you know, I just started um playing Skyrim again on the PS5, and I wonder, I mean this is maybe not as important of a point. I wonder like if the gameplay has been updated slightly or like the combat, because I don't seem to remember there being like the same types of animations with critical hits, but that might just be because I didn't play as much Skyrim as I did Oblivion back in the day, I think.
Yeah, I want to just say, like, I'm pretty confident that the critical hit animations were in the original Skyrim because I was a huge fan of Morrowind and Oblivion. Like, I was just obsessed with those games. And so Skyrim was like, I want to say it was the first game that I just avidly followed every scrap of information that was released and watched all of the trailers. And no, that can't be true because I was too old, but it was one of the first, for sure. The first game was actually, I think, Metal Gear Solid 3 in 2003. three or four. But Skyrim, I was avidly just every time a trailer would come out, I would go to like GameSpot.com, and like watch like the crappy like 360p or whatever trailer. And I do seem to remember, don't quote me on this, but I seem to remember the final trailer for the game ending with like it was like a stinger after the title of with a decapitation animation. And that
Wow.
was, I think the crowd went wild. It was like savage cheering at three or whatever the conference was. So the decapitations were new. The combat system was refined, and I want to talk about the combat because I think the combat in Skyrim is like tragically underrated. But I to speak to your comparison to Morrowind and Oblivion, like I do think one of the things that was lost in the sort of polishing of Skyrim is by far the most polished of those games, is a lot of the really crazy systemic interactions and physics tricks, I think were sort of shaved out of the series. It's harder to be like absolutely ridiculous in Skyrim outside of glitching, whereas in like Oblivion, you could like drink a bunch of skooma and just literally rocket off a mountain, which was incredible. It was like it turned like, Oblivion into basically like Jackass slash like Tony Hawk or something. And you could do similar stuff in Oblivion where you shoot yourself into the sky with those boots and then find like, I found I again I could be misquoting or misremembering, but I'm almost positive I just totally organically realized that if I equipped a levitation spell, which levitates you like a foot off the ground, I could jump into the sky with the magic boots that are supposed to kill you. They're like a gag. You fire up in the sky like, like in the glitches with the giants in Skyrim, and you land and you die. If you cast a levitation spell, you'll land a foot from the ground and not die. So I could actually like jump across the map by like jumping into, like into the atmosphere, basically. This is at least how I remember playing Morrowind. And so those games they were like in a way they were kind of crazier and more advanced than like Breath of the Wild, which is a game that gets so much credit for its systemic sort of emergent physics and gameplay. They were really ahead of their time in that way.
I'm really curious. I mean, obviously, I've been watching you play Skyrim over the PS5, and the style of play. I mean, as that anecdote shows, the style of play that you employ is radically different than mine. And so I'm curious how you would each characterize the style of play when you are entering the world of Skyrim.
I mean, I've definitely certain playthroughs, not right now because I'm pretty sure like I just started playing it again for the first time in years, like last week or something like that. So I remember a lot about it, but my character is still level 13 or something like that.
Mm.
But I mean, I remember and I would do the same thing and I wonder if this is too much of a tangent, but we could also maybe talk about it because it's a similar game, but I would do the same thing in Fallout, which is once I got to a certain level, I would basically just kill everybody that I found. So like right now I'm keeping it just to like hunters or fugitives or whatever, but this includes like the guards and everything. So I would have games where I would just like be standing outside the gates of a city after attacking a guard and then like waiting there and just having like all the guards come out and successfully killing all of them somehow, but you need to be like a really high level for that. That's honest. I mean, that's how I like to play the game because maybe partly because of the repetition of the game, it feels maybe better if you can kind of abandon the quest, like abandon yourself to just being this like outlaw, I guess. That's sort of how I would play the game. But yeah, what about you, Nathan?
Similar, I mean, these days I'm very goal oriented. So very combat oriented and goal oriented. So I really just am all about power leveling and getting good gear so I can kill more bandits. The number one thing I do in Skyrim is what Sam has, I think, quite eloquently dubbed ledging. So I would say I call myself a ledging aficionado. And ledging is simply using the force Fus Roda shout to blast people off cliffs. And there's a whole Eurogamer article, which I want to put in the show notes or something because I think it's so brilliant. It's my favorite thing written on Skyrim. In anticipation of Sam's book, and it's this very short tribute on Eurogamer for their best of the decade lists back in 2019. So Skyrim would be at the very beginning of that span. And the author, whose name I'm sadly forgetting right now, just talks about how fun it is to knock people off ledges and what this actually says about the kind of physics and even like the ontology of Skyrim. Just like the way its world just hangs together and fits with a kind of radical predictability and consistency that makes fucking around in it so fun. Um, so I would say everything for me leads to ledging. But at the same time, I would say when I first discovered the series, like when I first played Morrowind, I yeah, like killing entire villages was amazing. And in Morrowind, as I remember, you could actually kill everybody. The game would tell you you've broken the game, you've broken the plot. You should probably reload. But if you wanted to, you could go through a town and kill every single person. And I do have a couple thoughts about this. When I was playing, I mean, my goal, like my first ever Elder Scrolls file, I basically wanted to make a Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII, who has that iconic moment where he slaughters the entire village of Nibelheim, and sets it on fire or whatever. And I was like, this is a game where you can actually do that. You can be this guy who will just murder everyone in a town, like, and leave ruin in your wake. And I had played Grand Theft Auto, I'd played those other games that are often vilified for being like, oh, you can kill innocent people, you can do whatever you want, you can be utterly lawless. But it never had any purchase for me. It wasn't until Morrowind that I felt a true pleasure in causing a massacre. And I really think that's because, like, I mean, to go to what makes the series unique, only still it's to this day it's like among AAA games, open world games, it's only um uh Elder Scrolls games or Bethesda games as they used to make them that where the NPCs have like a deep sense of individuality and just they have lives, and so not to sound like a psychopath, but to like take their lives feels significant. And it feels like you're actually doing something. You're interacting with the world in like a consequential way, even though it's really dark or whatever. I just got such a thrill from that. Um, and the last thing, sorry, that I'm rambling, but I do have to mention this for you, Sam, primarily. Like, I remember, I think the first podcast I ever listened to in my entire life was in 2011 after Skyrim had come out, and I was listening to, I think it was a Eurogamer podcast, so they're all from the UK, talking about Skyrim. And one of the guys, I don't remember his name, was just describing how much fun he had, like murdering the whole village of River Run and like putting their naked bodies in the lumber contraption. And they were all chuckling, and that was the moment where I was like, do British people have like a really fucked up sense of humor? Like I was like completely scandalized by this podcast in a very kind of like prudish way, and like had to stop listening because I was so disturbed by by what these guys were talking about. Even though I mean they were just like it was all in jest, but they were uh, but yeah, it's just a formative. It's like it really is a vivid memory. Sitting on my bed in West Philly, listening to these British guys talk in their really cute accents about feeding naked bodies into the lumber machine in River Run.
Oh, you mean Riverwood? I think,
Riverwood, sorry.
yeah. Um, that's wild. I mean, I think you've joined them. You've joined the ranks of people who say fucked up shit about Skyrim, so you've really made it. Early adopter of podcasts too. I mean, I feel like I have to offer a counter perspective here because I feel like you both have sort of similar impulses when it comes to play style, and I don't have any of those impulses. I do like ledging. Ledging is objectively fun. You can't say it's not. No one doesn't like that. Like shooting people off buildings or cliffs, sometimes horses by accident. It's a great feeling. But I don't have any of the impulses that you both seem to have to kind of empty out the towns of NPCs. I just don't have that. I'm much more. I mean, I guess I'm a rule follower in it's not that surprising as a Victorianist that I would be sort of adhering to the quest lines and, following the rules and doing the things in the order that you're supposed to do them. Um, but I like to sneak around. I like to be quiet. I like nobody to know what I've done until after I've left. This is kind of my play style. I'm an archer. My sneak is always, 10 out of 10. And I want to do things right, and I don't want to be confronted. So it's like it's the absolute opposite to what the both of you said. Although I do want to say, in terms of being a rule follower, following the quests, caring about the narrative, which I do, there is something that I appreciate about Skyrim that makes it actually quite difficult to feel like you're doing it correctly, which is that the quests contradict each other in ways that I find really interesting, and it generates this really complicated morality where you can't. There's no real way to play Skyrim and just be the good guy no matter which quest line you're doing, no matter what faction you align yourself with, there aren't really any good options. And I think the realism of that is really underrated in Skyrim. I mean, that's what seems, just to go back to the first question you asked me, that's what seems to me to be so unique about Skyrim is, and maybe you'll think this is wrong and you've played more games than I have, but there are so many ways to approach it. And that feels more true for Skyrim to me than it does in other games. I don't know if that rings true to either of you or not.
I would say so, and I think maybe if Nathan and I are both these kind of anarchic scoundrels in the game, maybe that betrays a kind of impatience. Like I feel pretty impatient when I'm playing Skyrim. Like I love the game, it looks beautiful, but um, there is a kind of tedium that I know I would like have to, deal with if I was trying to follow this kind of uh quest line or, or whatever. Because I think partly because and Nathan, you said you wanted to talk about the combat too. I think the combat is like it is kind of blocky, but it's not blocky enough. Like it's not like Diablo, point and click combat, but it is very rigid, right? You can't really dodge, right? You can't really do too much. You could just kind of hit the same. You swing your weapon back and forth, and then you can block and stuff. But the blocking kind of sucks. I mean, it just makes me think of the other games I mean, the games I've played more than anything, which are the From Software games, and I have way more patience with those games, although they're like a lot harder. The combat's a lot harder. It's a lot more
Mm.
precise, and like it's not repetitive in the way that the Elder Scrolls games are. And I think maybe because of that, I can also like play the game more patiently in a narrative sense. So like, yeah, I can actually make sure I get the best weapon and level up and like join this faction or whatever in say Elden Ring or I guess Dark Souls. That I can't really be bothered to do that in Skyrim quite as much.
I wonder if this is dispositional because I have the opposite experience. I find the combat in Skyrim allows me to have more patience, whereas I find the combat. So we've been playing Elden Ring as well, and
Mm.
the combat in that game really does just feel like I'm just like hammering, hammering, hammering. And maybe I'm just doing it wrong. Which could be true, but it doesn't feel as there's something that doesn't feel as substantial about it. And maybe it's because of what you said, Nathan, about the NPCs not having as much individuality. Like it doesn't feel meaningful to dispense with them in the same way for me in, say, Elden Ring as it does in Skyrim. And part of that is the POV. I mean, I really struggle with the POV where I have to look at myself from the outside. So maybe it's partly that.
Yeah.
But for me, yeah, I find it to be the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, I would say I find the combat quite, loosey-goosey in its way. It's like you never can tell when you're landing a hit. You can tell when you're blocking sometimes, but like the feedback is really poor. There's no dodge, so there's none of the kind of timing. Basically timing is not a factor, whereas in Elden Ring and Souls games, those are games purely of timing.
Mm.
Um, when it comes to measuring out weapon swings or dodging and positioning. But what Skyrim does have that even that even From Software games and Souls-likes generally don't, is that it's built on, again, this like radically consistent physics engine and a kind of multiplicity of possible interactions that uh, totally encompasses combat and extends well beyond it. And so I'm really it's almost like uh, what I'm really captivated by, partly about the combat, is the fact that it doesn't have to be combat, i.e., that like in Skyrim, you can both uh, put a basket on somebody's head. You can at once put a basket on somebody's head, just in this kind of crude, sort of comical physics interaction between an NPC and a kind of static, an object. You can sneak up to them and actually rifle through their pockets, and look at like, oh, they've got, an emerald, they've got a sweet roll or whatever, and like look at individual contents of their pockets, like we're playing, I don't know, like The Sims or something, or like like a farm simulator.
Yes.
And you can also murder them or shoot them off a mountain. And the fact that all of the things are intertwined makes the basic activity of combat far more fun and meaningful to me than it would be if the other stuff didn't exist. But
Mm.
I also just think that like there is a consistency and a heft to Skyrim combat that is itself like pretty damn good. I don't know. I think it feels good to like drop an enemy with an arrow when they're running at you.
Mm.
It feels good to do like the not level one force blast, Fusroda, stun a guy, and then like hit him with a heavy strike with a great sword. Like it has a tactility that is still, I would say, I mean, far better than the combat in, say, The Witcher 3 or
Mm.
in Red Dead Redemption or in Assassin's Creed. I mean, these games there's more things you can do. Like you have more moves, there's more maneuverability. But like, frankly, the combat is dog shit. Like, it just feels like soup in all of those games. And at least in Skyrim, there's some level of precision. It's not precision of timing or like precision of inputs, but there is precision. There's like consistency. We know like how enemies are going to move. We know what parts of the environment they're going to interact with. Um, and we know at any point like there's a range of possible interactions or decisions we can make. Whereas like when I'm playing Assassin's Creed, I'm basically not making any decisions. I'm
Mhm.
just kind of flowing around and like wailing on the same button or using the same power-ups over and over again. So the level of, I guess what I mean is like there is a degree of thoughtfulness
Yeah.
to the experience of Skyrim combat that is never, in my mind, like basically never discussed. Like people
Mm.
shit on Skyrim combat all the time. It's just so common to see people say, oh yeah, Skyrim is like whatever, fine game for its time, but the combat sucks, and like let's look for, here's a game, game X is Skyrim, but with actually good combat, you know. And I've even said that about something like Elden Ring, but I do think it's, I say it facetiously because I think that like I just yeah, again, like these games just, especially Skyrim, should get much more credit for their combat design.
Yeah, I'm thinking about your book, Nathan, where you talk about the unfairness in Bloodborne, about enemies hitting you through walls and things like that. And that is one thing. I mean, there is the predictability of the combat in Skyrim. I really enjoy that. It feels fair in a way that's very appealing to me. And it's very predictable. You know what a hit is going to do. No one's going to hit you through a wall. I mean, the glitches during combat are amazing, but they're never glitches that disadvantage the player. It might be, somebody dies half off a cliff and is somehow, still laying on solid air,
Or
but
they
it's never,
submerged it in the earth. Like you can see their arms moving in their head, but their legs have clipped below the ground line, and they're just like running around underground.
yeah. And to your point about ledging too, I mean, the reason that ledging feels so good is because the enemies like they'll predictably like flail. When you shoot them off of ledges, there's an animation for that I just think is yeah, really underrated. I actually watched Nathan get ledged for the first time in his life last night in Wolf Skull Cave. 3 times? Was it four?
I think I got ledged 4 times. I've played hundreds of hours of Skyrim, have never once been ledged. Um, and This was, yeah, it was a really important moment. I was trying to get all like this huge mass of enemies. Like it was like seven Draugr or something, or like five Draugr and some necromancers. I wanted them all to come out. So this is the kind of thing you can do in Skyrim. You can't do this in like a lot of other games. I was trying to draw them all out onto the same bridge and then blast them off at the same time. And the problem was there was this one Draugr Deathlord who himself has the Fusro Dash out. And he kept fucking blasting me off the bridge. And it was amazing. Like it was so funny every time. It was frustrating because the game does that weird thing where like it cuts to third person camera when you get shouted. And I would fly off the bridge and I was like you lose control of the game. And the funny thing that kept happening was that the character model would fall on the ground and then my sword, like just a second after, would land on top of me because the sword is like acting as an independent object. So it's flying through the air, I think, and presumably, and then just like landing right by my corpse. Um, but just the fact that enemies can do that to you is amazing, like
Yeah.
that they follow the same rules, and therefore your avatar follows the same rules as everybody
Yes.
else.
You also flailed. It was amazing.
I'll remember my first ledging forever.
I'm so glad I witnessed it. It was really a spectacular moment. You were very surprised. And you had tried to do it to him, and he couldn't be ledged because he was too strong or something.
Yeah, I think I could be wrong, but he had some kind of like ledging armor. Like you couldn't. He was such a high level that if I tried to blast him off, he would just he would get stunned, but he wouldn't move. Um, and was just kind of dumping on Assassin's Creed, but Assassin's Creed Odyssey also has a Skyrim-esque ledging move. It's a kick. Best part of that game. That and the
Hmm.
ship combat. Also, I mean, also great game. I love Odyssey, but uh, it does something similar where like really really high level enemies can't be kicked. They won't fly backwards. They won't obey the same like physics reaction that others do, which is annoying. I like games where even every one of us may be ledged. From the lowliest pauper to the omnipotent dreadlord, may find themselves flying through the air.
I'm really glad you mentioned The Sims because I was thinking about that when you were both talking about going into villages and just sort of like basically picking people up and moving them around and doing things with them. I mean, that was the appeal of Sims. It's kind of incredible that Skyrim has managed to incorporate like what was pleasurable about that in a completely different framework.
Mhm. Brian, did you want to I mean to change gears really quickly, like still thinking of like questions of limitation, just like really broadly speaking, which I realize has been a theme of some of our discussions about Elden Ring too.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you were texting me last night about like what it's like to reach the edge of the map. So like a different kind of like, the limitation before like the kind of expanse of space was contrasted with like the limitations of like interactions, and character models. But also the map is necessarily limited as well. And I feel like I just anecdotally I know Sam, you as well have thoughts about the what it means to reach the end of the world in one of these games.
Yeah, I mean, so last night when I was playing, I think I just went north and there's like all these kind of like icebergs or whatever out there, and you can kind of jump around on these little kind of heavy things of ice. And I mean, I just spent time just kind of like swimming around out there, I guess. Like it doesn't really seem like there's much of anything out there. Like, so it's kind of like a useless space that has no, and I'm not going anywhere because I can only go to the edge of the map and then I have to turn around or whatever. I guess I could go underwater and drown or something, but otherwise there's like not too much else to do out there. I mean, this is something that I have like, uh, I think when I played specifically Fallout 3, which I think was the always my favorite one, I was like really obsessive about that. Like not only discovering all of the places that you could travel to or whatever, but going to every single, like basically tracing the edge of the whole map if possible. I know it's a different franchise and everything, but or different series, but yeah, there's something odd about that. I mean, it is a space, right? It's like a phenomenological space that again, isn't connected to anything, isn't really connected to um any kind of lore necessarily, right? It's just there. But because it's not in between anything, like it's an end point in a certain way, but it's like a useless endpoint. So I don't know, it kind of makes me think of what we talked about recently about, different ways of understanding narrative or something, right? Like it feels pretty narrative for me as a player to just go to the edge of the not necessarily even specifically to the edge of the map, but just to like an empty space in the game, right? Precisely because it's disconnected from anything discursive. There's no dialogue. There aren't any other characters. There may be salmon that I can catch, but I think that was pretty much it. So I don't know. I'm not sure that I have like too many formed thoughts about it, but I do. That is like kind of one of my favorite parts about playing the game. And
So
just
for you,
just to touch too back on the combat. I wasn't necessarily trying to knock the combat. I mean, I do think that it's like fun combat. Um, but sort of what I'm thinking after hearing you two talk about this for a while, like the whole world of the game like makes the combat okay. Like I think it's that balance that makes it happen, right? Like so the fact that okay, I can get to the edge of the map, that means that this like kind of boring sometimes combat is fine, right? Because it's in this world that where that combat makes sense. Like I don't think that would necessarily if I could do crazy intricate, different moves or whatever and had different move sets, then I don't know that it would feel like the same kind of game. So I don't know. I think maybe this is my own little obsession or something when thinking about games is thinking about like how they're realistic because all games are in some sense realistic, but it has to do with this kind of balance, like balance between almost different rhythms or narrative rhythms or like experiential rhythms versus like what the world is versus how you can actually control the character. I mean, Sam, I think you said something about like the third person view. Maybe you were talking about Elden Ring, but third person view in Skyrim is awful. I can't imagine ever trying to do any combat move at all with it. It's so disorienting and it seems totally the only time I use it is when I'm trying to jump up a mountain and I want to see like how I can like where I can conceivably actually go. But yeah, I don't know.
I only use it when I'm looking at what I'm wearing, which is sometimes accidentally nothing, because sometimes you change outfits or you quests make you take your clothes off or you sell them and don't realize that you're wearing them. So yeah, when I'm using the third person, I'm usually discovering that I'm naked. People are looking at me strangely in the street. Yeah, I mean, just to touch on what you said about the combat and the style of combat. I mean, for me, I think that Elden Ring comparison is a good one for the point I want to make, which is that in Skyrim, it feels like all of the combat is attached to a kind of characterization that is in turn attached to a narrative structure. And that's important for me, although it isn't for all gamers. And so when you're wandering through the woods outside of Riften and you are attacked, you're being attacked by a vampire, which is linked to the Dawn Guard quest, which is something you can go and find nearby and become one of the vampire hunters. And so for me, the combat is narrative in Skyrim in a way that it isn't in, say, I mean, I haven't played much of Elden Ring, and so you can correct me on this, but just in terms of the ambient combat, you're wandering around, the chapels, and it's being patrolled by guards who all kind of look the same. They don't talk to you. They're not part of a vampire quest line. And to me, that is just a bit less appealing. It makes the combat less appealing. If I'm killing a vampire, I'm participating in an entire narrative structure in Skyrim in a way that I don't yet feel like I am in Elden Ring, although we could check back on that and see once I learn more about that game.
hmm.
I think that's interesting because it does like I think that might be right. Uh, but I also think that as Nathan and I have kind of talked about, like in Elden Ring, you don't really get notified of anything. So like there are moments where maybe you accidentally like, kill some guy or something like that. Or I've definitely like snuck up on people who I thought were enemies, but they were NPCs, and I like had no choice but to kill them because I hit them and they started attacking me or whatever. So there are these ways that that's I guess unscripted is not the right word, but it's like you don't really get told. Whereas in Elden Ring, it totally follows that. And I just started playing Planescape Torment, which does the same thing where like you read a bunch of stuff and it will say, I added this to my journal, I updated my journal or something like that. And that's like kind of the notification system we get in Skyrim. Um, but also like I mean a different thing or a difference about the From Software games in Skyrim, which might not necessarily be correct, but I think or might not be strict, but because it's so easily observable in the From Software games, it feels a lot more rigid, is that the enemies are always in the same places doing the same thing, and then they kill you and they keep doing the same thing. Like they're always walking back and forth, or at least if they're moving around a little more freely, it's within like a certain circuit or something like that. And because I don't know, because of the sort of depth perception of the game, you can just like stand back and watch that happen. Whereas I feel like you kind of in Skyrim, if someone attacks you, oftentimes they're running from nowhere. Like they just start running at you. They're not like it's not like you have to like slowly creep toward them as they're pacing back and forth. So it feels a lot more random, but at the same time, it is like you said, it's like narrative. So that's maybe that like balance that happens. It's kind of I don't know. That's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, the enemies do run at you like homing missiles, right? Like that's just how they're designed. They all run at you in a crowd, basically, and they're like lemmings or whatever, and you just dispatch them as you will. But they are relentless in their way, and thus it is a difference from soft games where it feels like I mean we've talked about this, Brian and Sam, we've talked about it too, but the way that the games just the enemies don't even seem like they're that committed to killing you. You know, they'll kill you and they'll kill you in two hits, but they'll just walk away and they'll go back to their positions. And there's a greater sense of like artificial clockwork system in the Souls games, whereas in Skyrim there's I think way more systemic interactions going on, right, at every level of the game. But it does have this way in which the whole world is zeroing towards you at all points. Like the way that enemies like fire towards you, again like a homing like torpedo is similar to the way that like the narrative will find you too. Like, that the narrative is tailored to the player that positions them as the Dragonborn, right? As this omnipotent sort of being who's able to, for instance, like yeah, play every side of every conflict, to be a member of every faction, to do every single quest in the game. You're never locked out of a quest, or at least that's extremely rare. And so it is a world that's like it's like every component of the world has its eye fixed on you.
Yeah.
Uh, from the wildlife to the dragons to the quests to the random couriers who run out of nowhere, which feels emergent and dynamic, and yet they just like latch onto you like magnets, and then they say their candle lines and they give you their sort of procedurally generated letter or whatever. It just feels like there are all these different vectors at all times that are operative, that are all pointing towards the player.
Yeah, and the first time that happens, like in it's 2011, you're playing Skyrim for the first time, and a courier comes flying toward you in the middle of the wilderness. It's random, it can happen. It doesn't happen in the same place. Some of them do, but what it happened to me today. A courier ran up to me in Riften, and I was still like, "Ooh, I am so important." It's really a great feature. Just to speak, just on that note, thinking about what you said about how you can join every quest line, you can be a vampire hunter and a vampire, sort of at the same time. Have you ever had a situation where totally conflicting enemies attack you at the same time and then also attack each other? That is a feature of this game that I really love. I mean, you can be attacked by cultists in Whiterun and also by a dragon at the same time. And there is something so chaotic about that feels essential to the mission of the open world game. It's like the promise of the randomness fulfilled in those moments. I love those moments, where you're killing a giant for somebody on a farm, and then a assassin comes to kill you because you stole something from Bellathor. And
Mhm.
it's just random that these things happen at the same time. And to me, I I don't I can't think of other games where something like that feels so organic and wrong in the way that life really is happens in game worlds.
Yeah. No, I mean the random the or the kind of you get like the emergent stuff that can occur is just is so special, and that's another thing that like some open world games have it, but a lot of open worlds are pretty rigid. I mean Elden Ring is really rigid. There's not a lot of emergent stuff happening there. Um, I was also just thinking of as you said, like you can be both the vampire hunter and the vampire. Um, and this is this kind of like labored connection, but it just made me think of in Ulysses and James Joyce's Ulysses, like Stephen Dedalus has this theory of Hamlet that keeps getting previewed like throughout the book, and you're like really and like you're sort of like, oh, what's his like reading of Hamlet? What's his theory of Hamlet going to be? And then he gives a lecture on Hamlet, and his theory is just that Hamlet is modeled both on Shakespeare's son and Shakespeare himself. So he's like both the son and he's like his own father or whatever. And that's like kind of like the avatar in Skyrim. Like in Skyrim, you can be your own father, more or less. You can be like two antithetical, identities, and they're all just folded into this one blank person, which is so different from, again, not to keep. I mean, it's fitting that we keep talking about Elden Ring, but like a Souls game, choosing one thing almost invariably locks you out of something else.
Hmm.
You can't be your own father in Elden Ring, even though spoiler, I guess the big reveal in Elden Ring is that Marika is her own husband. So I guess make of that what you will.
Wow.
I wonder how that relates to like the narrative perspective in the game though, because I think like one thing I was thinking about as with the few hours I've played over the last couple of weeks is how anytime you go into a town in Skyrim, you overhear people talking about you and they don't know it's you, right? So like I do think the randomness and the kind of chance, I mean, obviously narratively in the larger scope of the game that feels like forced and kind of obviously calculated, right? But it's for the player or for like the I guess the player character, it's random that you would just overhear like somebody like they're you overhear that and it's for you, but like it's not for you, if that makes sense, right? There's this, so I feel like there's a lot of tension between both like everything coming at you, like the couriers or the bounty hunters or whatever that will come out of nowhere. And if you pickpocket somebody, there's instantly, a guard who comes and, you know, uh tells you to pay up the fine or whatever, or else you have to fight them or go to jail. Um, but then, yeah, at the same time, you can do all this stuff that just makes no sense. You can be, like you said, a vampire and a vampire hunter. Uh,
Yeah, everybody is watching you in Skyrim, and maybe that's why I feel such a strong desire to hide and sneak and sort of try and get under the radar. Like maybe that's my form of rebellion. I was just saying to Nathan earlier this week that when I was a kid playing Tomb Raider, I used to think that the game knew what I was doing, that it could see me, and Tomb Raider can't, but like Skyrim can. Like Skyrim knows what you did. The guards know that you stole. I got a message from a courier just today saying, I heard you shout in Dayspring Canyon. You might want to go and check out the Lost Tongue Overlook. And I think that is creepy and also fascinating, and perhaps explains my intense desire to sneak everywhere and see if I can get in and out without somebody saying, I saw you do that thing.
I am now realizing that Skyrim does, despite my kind of like haphazard sort of like yeah, anarchic Brian like play style in Skyrim quite often, it does inspire a certain degree of paranoia where, for instance, I love going into people's houses and like taking their shit, but
Mhm.
I know I have the sense that I know that the game's tracking this. So even if no NPC is in the house, I'm like, well, I could steal this ring. But I don't know if the game is going to track that anyway, even if there's no one there to see me. And
Yeah.
so it's a kind of like panopticon where I'm just self-regulating at all times,
Yeah.
and sort of making decisions, moral decisions based on the assumption that everything that I do is being tracked, even beyond what's realistic for the game. And that is frustrating to me. Like I do get annoyed that like I'm like, hey, nobody saw me take that ring, man. Like why? I know that like the game is sort of revealing its inner workings. I would think, I don't actually know, but it's sort of how I read it when that sort of thing happens. But um, I mean, Sam, I was saying to you yesterday when I was streaming, like the my workaround has always been just to steal gold because gold is untraceable. So I feel like there's there's a kind of there's an aptness to that too, that you don't steal objects, just steal money because money's not
Mhm.
real. And it'll just get added to your bank account and you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's locked.
whereas objects are incriminating and they have that annoying red font in your inventory, which drives me
Yeah.
crazy. I hate that. Um,
Aesthetically.
exactly, purely aesthetically. Not because I feel guilty, but because there's red crap in my inventory.
I knew it. Yeah. I want to say something that can actually get us back to you swimming off into the ice caps, just on this topic of being caught for stealing stuff. Um, this is how I found the edge of the world. So I came out of a cave recently and I was approached by two henchmen who had come to kill me because I had stolen something. And I can't remember if I even did or didn't, or if they were glitched. I don't know. But apparently the game had seen me steal something, even though nobody was there. And these two henchmen come running at me as soon as I exit this cave. So I'm like blinking in the sunlight, and these two men are just coming at me immediately. They were very strong too. I found out later I had the difficulty set way too high. Anyway, so I ledge these two guys, or I try to. I think one of them falls, one of them doesn't. I'm running, I'm running, I'm running. Out of nowhere, this henchman is following me. A mage comes out of the woods just for no reason, like apropos of nothing, and starts firing like fireballs at me. So now I'm fighting a henchman and a mage. I keep heading up. This high elf shows up on a horse, and both he and the horse then start fighting me. And I'm not strong enough at this point I can't win. Like, I know I can't win. So I'm like, well, shit, I'm just gonna run. So I start running, and the horse is like hot on my heels. I'm trying to kill horses are very strong. I don't recommend fighting horses in Skyrim. And so I see an archway ahead. I'm like, okay, great, a village. I'll just go in a house and they'll forget about me. Um, and so I get to this archway, and the horse is like, the hooves are coming down on me. And then this tech, I'm not getting through the archway, and I don't understand why. And then this text comes across the screen, and it says, "You cannot go that way." And I was like, "What?" So I guess I found there is a place in, because I think when you're swimming, I think I haven't tried this, but someone told me that if you're swimming up north, it'll just let you swim forever. But I found this archway that you can't go through, and it says, "Sorry, you cannot go this way." And it was existentially horrifying that I had come to the end of what was supposed to be an open world. Anyway, then I think I died immediately at that point. But it was a whole confluence of the things that we've talked about, like the overlapping enemies, the bounties coming out of nowhere, Skyrim is watching you, and then like finding the edge of the world. And it really was jarring to not be able to go that way.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, well, for one, I mean, we were talking about like narrative context and justification, and it's just like one of those thorny problems with open worlds is that it's hard to think of a narrative reason why the character can't just continue,
Mhm.
or a diegetic reason, which is why so many open worlds are ultimately complete land masses that are floating in ocean, because like water seems like a much more practical barrier for
Mhm.
traversal, especially if your avatar can't swim. But it leads to kind of certain absurdities, like in San Andreas, not the game, but the fictional state, which is like Rockstar's version, the Grand Theft Auto series' version of California. It contains like Big Sur. It has, yeah, Northern California and LA, and Southern California and like the Valley, or the Central Valley, and other parts of California geography. And yet it's itself just like an almost like an egg-shaped island. So it's like California as if it were an island without any connection to the rest of the country. And it just feels really silly or weird. You like, drive in a circle, like, and you can go like, from Big Sur to LA and back and just do it perpetually because you're just tracing the coastline. But that's a case where it seems partly as a response to like the you can't go there problem. Like, how do you sh keep the player? How do you assert some boundaries, in what necessarily has to be a bounded space if it's going to be a created space,
Mhm.
and not infinitely sort of procedurally generated.
Yeah, it seems just odd that it would be specifically like an archway, as if there's an invisible, I mean, that really literalizes the invisible barrier of the edge of the map or whatever. Because
You're
usually,
right. It's a literal invisible wall because it's like a
yeah,
human structure, you know what I mean? That
yeah,
says
yeah.
you can't go. I do think there are more places in the map when if you're just the problem with Skyrim, the realm of Skyrim in the kind of Elder Scrolls lore is that it's contiguous with the rest of is it Tamriel, whatever the landmass is that you're on. And so it can't be an island and there are places where you're going to butt up against the border of the next province or whatever. And often I think like mountains, will block that or cliffs, but there are places. I think there's a few other places where you'll get that you can't go there. You
Hmm.
can't go that way message, which is totally non-diegetic. It's just
Yeah.
the system telling you, yeah, like you've reached the end of what we designed for you.
Yeah, and it feels that way. And you can see through the arch too. I mean, you can see the town, but it's an illusion.
I
Yeah,
didn't realize there was an actual visible town beyond the arch.
yeah,
That's
you can see through the arch. That was what was so disconcerting about it. When, and especially when you're mid-combat, you're very immersed in the world of the game. And so I think for it to have been that moment when I ran into the archway, it was also even more shocking.
That's true. It's the antithesis of like a contemplative or reflective perspective on the game and its systems and its form when you're in the immersed of it, like in the immersed, when you're immersed in a scrum, you have to be just thinking about the next move and the next spell you're going to use.
I wonder if either, I mean, I'm sure you have, I guess, because we've already talked about glitches, but I remember um these games tend to have like, and this is maybe even related to the stealing thing because when you steal something, like it does tell you bounty added, right? It'll usually say you don't know beforehand if it's going to say that or not. So that's like where the uncertainty comes in. I almost think it would be better if you didn't, again, if you didn't get almost if Skyrim had fewer notifications, there would be something like really, really cool about it, right? Especially the bounty, because if you thought you were getting away with all this stealing and then, 10 gameplay hours later you got accosted by and then you have this gigantic bounty that would be kind of narratively interesting. But in terms of glitches, like some of the glitches are just completely asinine. Like you go and do some part of a quest and it just doesn't register that you did it,
Yeah.
which seems to happen a lot in these games. Like I went, one of the only quest things that I've really done so far, other than maybe a couple really minor ones, is go to the those old guys who are on top of a mountain, like the
Yeah.
something beards or whatever, right? Is that what they're called?
Greybeards at High Hrothgar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he's like, yeah, show me your shout or whatever. And I did. And then it says, okay, now talk to this guy. And then I talked to him and I exhausted all of the options. It was so tedious. I went through everything. I did all the dialogue trees, and there's still the thing above his head, like I didn't do it. So I just eventually left. So it's like, and then in those moments too, it's like, well, you can't, I mean, what can you do? There are these like weird, it's almost as if it's like another kind of invisible wall that you run up against sometimes. Like I remember when I was younger playing these games and having files where I just couldn't complete certain quests because that would happen. And it was the simplest thing, like, I don't know, bring this one guy a piece of bread, for example, or something like that. And like I did, and then, there was just some snag where I couldn't get to it.
There are really meaningful glitches, though, sometimes. I mean, I'm a big fan of the meaningful glitch. And one of the ones that comes to mind is that I was supposed to um, bring something to a man on a farm. I think I was bringing his son to him or something. It was something, it was an emotionally loaded quest. And when I got to the farm, I found out that he had been just randomly killed by a dragon. Like, so he was just dead. And so I never could complete the quest. But that created an entire unintended narrative that the designers didn't plan. And so, yeah, there are definitely these glitches where you are running up against a wall and the designers are like, sorry, we didn't build that. But then there's also, where the quest marker still hovers over somebody you've already talked to. But then there are these moments in Skyrim where the glitches create something completely new that adds a different texture to the gameplay. And that also happens a lot in Skyrim.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think of the glitches as like just a testament to the immense complexity of the game, and how many things are going at once. It's such a volatile game, it's such an unstable game. Bethesda games in the classic style have always are famous for that. And yeah, it's like really frustrating, and I'll speak to the frustration in a second, but I think just as a starting point, I do find them charming, not just because they're funny, but because it's just again, they emblematize just how many little things are going on and like how complex the machine is. Uh, but all that said, I would say, I mentioned that like Skyrim evokes a kind of like like universal paranoia in the player, despite them being clearly the more despite and because they're the star of the show, they're the single most important person in this world. Um, but it also, at least in when I played on the original Xbox 360, I think, it inspired a kind of like glitch hypochondria. So I was always so worried about my file because I cared so much about my character. I was constantly terrified of my file being corrupted. So I would like have so many different manual saves, different slots. So I'd be like, well, if something bad happens to this save, I always have this one. But the hypochondria would come in when some tiny little thing would happen that was a little bit off. You know, like a sweet roll would get knocked off a table and would just be hovering in midair. And then that it would be exactly like, if like my like pinky finger started hurting and I was like, I have cancer. Because like, I'd be like, that sweet roll is hovering in the air. Like that means like what does that mean? Does that mean that like the quest is broken? Does that mean that my character is not going to level up anymore? Does that mean that the system like there's some actual much deeper breakage happening at some level of the game's guts? And so I would get really paranoid and, I would restart the game if I had a successful run through a dungeon and like the last bandit chief like clipped through the floor. And I'd be like,
Mm,
well, I can't preserve a game with this imperfection in it. Like a five that could, who knows? Like that bandit chief could be fucking up the, the source code or whatever. I have no idea. It's just like so it was a funny sort of behavioral patterns that this combination of like extreme instability and just immersion and depth, like necessitating untold hours being poured into the work,
yeah.
creates.
I mean,
I totally remember that. I remember the hypochondria, although yours sounds worse than mine. But I don't know if you remember, as Nathan knows, I've been playing this on the PlayStation 3 for an embarrassing amount of time. I'm not anymore. But the PlayStation 3 has this famous glitch where the autosave will cause the game to freeze. And so I adapted my gameplay to prepare because I knew it was going to happen not all the time, but sometimes. And when I would like enter certain rooms or go into new areas, before I would do that, I would have to save it because it was so common that the game would just freeze. But you also didn't know if it was freezing because the load times were so long. So I've spent hours of my life combined staring at the load screen to see if it's just like taking the normal absurd amount of time or whether or not it's done that loading freeze. So that's like really woven into the fabric of my memories of this game is it frozen? Is it frozen?
That's the door thing is amazing. And now I'm just imagining you like standing before a door and being like, this could be my last door. Like I better save the game. It's kind of like it's just making me think of the sort of pure existential terror. I'm sorry, if this is like really dark or whatever. But it's like being an otherwise healthy person who's told that they have a rare condition that may cause them to die in their sleep at any moment. And so like you just never know when the next cat nap you take will be your
Yeah.
last. It's like you never know when the next door you walk through in Skyrim will be your last or the next level up you initiate.
Yeah.
And just having that like always hanging over you must be a kind of yeah, like a kind of torture.
Yeah, and the saves used to have thumbnails showing you a small image of where you
It's
had been, and all of mine were doors.
Man, I should have put that in the Doors chapter of the Bloodborne book. I wish I knew about it. I also have to say, just like Brian, like just for the record, Sam has been playing a PS3 since. I mean, I'm sorry, she was still playing a PS3 as of last year. Like
no.
that was your primary console
Do you
for
just
Skyrim,
do you
which
just
is
Mhm.
like the Spider-Man font or whatever that's on it, or
I have inherited all of my PlayStations from other people, and
Mm.
so that's just the last one that I had gotten. And then I inherited Nathan's PlayStation 4, which was also a hand-me-down, and now I actually bought my own PlayStation 5. Yeah, so now I'm a real girl.
We're
And
so,
we could technically all party up in Elden Ring because you can co-op with more than two people.
yeah, we
I
should.
suck at Elden Ring. I'm so bad.
I I don't know if either of you have this on Skyrim, but I'd say 3 or 4 times. This is just a kind of a tangent or whatever, but 3 or 4 times now my game has just died like mid action. I don't know if that's happened to either of you. It hasn't been catastrophic, but it has happened a few times, like in relatively short gameplay. So I'm just kind of curious if that's like it's a common thing. But
Like
It
just a
just
regular
quit.
crack.
yeah, just like crashed. And that hasn't happened, I don't think, with any other games that I've played on the PS5.
I think, Brian, are you playing with mods installed?
Not that I know of. I'm
Yeah.
assuming that I have to do that
Because
manually
you
because
texted me a joke about an enemy, and I was like, I don't remember that enemy. And then I looked it up and saw it was like a kind of player added um, enemy. Because the PS5 version, I think by default may include it includes a lot of like both fan-made mods and fan-made quest lines in additions to the game. So I
oh
wonder if you started the game just by default with some fan-made extras in there, and that maybe those are making it even more unstable. I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever had a hard crash in Skyrim.
yeah,
I'm
maybe.
sure it's common. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, fittingly, it may be time to hard crash this podcast since I know, Brian, you have to run home.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts from either of you on Skyrim before we go?
There's not time.
Yeah, no, I think I'm gonna definitely continue playing it. I'm glad we did this and glad to be playing it again for sure.
Yeah, maybe if either we can have a part two, or if the rumored Oblivion remake is happening, we can play that and talk about Oblivion because I feel like there's so obviously so much more ground to cover with Elder Scrolls games. We didn't even get to ask about memory. I mean, Sam, you work on, I know, sorry, I'm not to just tell you what you work on, but I know that you you work on memory in the Victorian novel, and I'm remembering the first time we met, we talked about how video game spaces imprint on the memory in this like incredibly palpable way where it's like they sometimes are more vivid than real spaces, and you can dream about video game spaces.
Mhm.
So that's definitely, I mean, Skyrim, I think Elder Scrolls games are particularly conducive perhaps to that because they're so detail rich and they're so filled in. Like we didn't even talk about the fact that you can read any book or like pick up any object. So definitely lots more meat on the bone, as it were. But I think for now, just Sam, thanks so much for joining us for this conversation. We really appreciate it. It's been really fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, thank you guys. It's given me a lot of ideas also for chapters of my book. So lots to chew on.
awesome. Yeah, you'll have to come back on. But yeah, thank you. This was great.
Anytime.